Hello, everyone out there watching this. I just wanted to give a quick little intro since this is my first episode. My name is Jim, and this is the Getting Into It podcast. We're going to be looking into all kinds of things about ancient civilizations, cataclysms, everything that's Egypt, the pyramids, the boxes in the Serapeum of Saqqara, evidence that's been left behind of advanced machining technology. Just crazy, mind-blowing stuff. A couple of things you might notice in my first episode are my beautiful nail polish. My two little girls opened a nail salon in the house over the weekend, and Daddy was their first customer. So that's what that's about. And also, a week ago, I was eating some cashews and chipped one of my freaking teeth. So I'm just going to try to stay hidden behind this microphone until I get that fixed. So if you're interested in topics like the pyramids or the Serapeum or ancient civilizations, cataclysms, evidence of advanced technology, the Anunnaki, the Sumerians, stay tuned to my channel because there will be more episodes to come covering all that kind of stuff. My favorite people to follow are Graham Hancock, Randall Carlson, Christopher Dunn, George Howard, Russ and Kyle from the Brothers of the Serpent, Ben from Uncharted X, Johanna James, The Land of Chem, Jeffrey Drum, who thinks the pyramids were chemical factories. Very interesting theory. Jimmy Corsetti, Luke Caverns, or Billy Carson. They all have some amazing theories behind our ancient history that I don't think has been told correctly or taught correctly in textbooks or our schools or anywhere for that matter. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe to my channel. The more subscribers and views I get will let me keep doing this. My first guest for my first episode is Mr. George Howard, who has been investigating ancient civilizations and cataclysmic events and the Younger Dryas for decades. He's involved with things like the Carolina Bays, and there's all kinds of evidence across the country to support that comet or a meteor struck our Earth and wiped out whatever civilization was here, and we basically started from hunters and gatherers again. And there are people that theorize this may have happened several times in our past that we don't even know about. Unfortunately, George broke his ankle a couple weeks ago, and my traveling budget with 3 kids and a house isn't exactly what it needs to be, so we're doing this one on Zoom. I know they're always better when they're in person, but forgive me for that. It's on Zoom, and that's the best I could do, and I was super grateful and lucky to get George Howard to agree to do my first episode, having no street cred whatsoever. So, without further ado, let's get into it with George Howard. Should we do the fancy transition again to the interview? I think we should. Why not? I've learned a lot about video editing over the past couple weeks. Anyways, I hope you enjoy. Please subscribe. Please tell your friends. and thank you so much for your support. Mr. George Howard, welcome, sir.
Hey Jim, how you doing? It's good to be on Getting Into It.
I'm very honored to have you on here. Thanks for making the time for me.
Sure thing, buddy. I appreciate you inviting me.
Thank you. First thing I wanted to start off with is a little history of how you got into all this.
Yeah.
I know you were
Um,
working in the government back in the day.
yeah, I worked in the U.S. Senate when I got out of college in the 90s, in 1990, and worked on up there in Capitol Hill on that side of things for 6 years. And I did directly lead me to these subjects, as you might imagine, because that's pretty serious stuff. Some of these things don't seem so serious, even though they are. And but it is where I discovered Carolina bays, because I was the wetland. I had in my portfolio of subjects wetlands, which may not seem like a big thing, but at that time that was really controversial. And my boss was trying to deregulate wetlands for better or worse, probably worse. And came across a land feature called a Carolina Bay and ignored it and thought that was so strange that a particular high profile nationally known land feature would be known as the Carolina Bays because we were from North Carolina, but that didn't look it up or anything like that. Figured it had something to do with the coast. And then my boss asked one day for me to get him a map of his farm, and he was a big landowner. And he said, "Yeah, get me a USGS topo quad of my farm in Sampson County, 1 to 25,000 scale." And I said, I didn't know what the hell that was, but I called up the U.S. Geological Service and told them I wanted such a map. And the next day, they came over with a tube, and I went in the senator's office, rolled it out for him, and he was just sitting there looking at whatever he wanted to look at. And I saw all over the thing, varying sizes, all these oriented and aligned elliptical lines. You didn't know they were depressions, just showed these ellipses. The USGS has a certain way of noting Carolina bays. And I said, "What are all those green ellipses on your farm?" And he said, "Meteor holes." And I was thinking to myself, you don't want to say back, "What the hell are you talking about? We mean meteor holes." I said, "Senator, do you mean craters?" I'm kind of a science geek, love that kind of stuff. I didn't know there was any uh, notation of a crater of any kind in North Carolina. He says, "Oh, they call them Carolina bays." And I said, "No shit. That's what that damn wetland type is. Carolina Bay." I said, "What do you mean it's a crater?" He said, "Oh, it's the biggest thing when I was a boy. Um, Everybody was a buzz about it, and that a comet had crashed into North Carolina." And I was like, "That's the craziest thing coming from an old gentleman like that grew up in the 20s and 30s." And I was like, "What in the world? A comet crashed in the Carolinas?" And I went completely obsessive with it. And the internet had just come out. And I was literally the first person in the office, probably one of the first regular staffers in the Senate to have the internet, because I asked for it. My IT guy ran a line over to me. And somebody had put up a page. Bob Cobras from the University of Georgia had put up a page with everything he could find about Carolina Bays. So it was already out there in 93, and got to know Bob and went and read Savage's book, The Mysterious Carolina Bays, which I highly recommend, and just read everything I could get on it. And that led me to the Younger Dryas event that Bob suggested could have been related to the Carolina Bays. So I had a buddy that had gone back to college to finish up his last couple of courses there in the 90s, and he was taking geology. And he said, "George, could you write me some notes on the Carolina Bays?" Write him some notes because it was a subject for a paper. I said, "Yeah, I'll bang you out something." So I knocked out a 25-page essay on the Carolina Bays. He got like a B plus or something like that. And then I didn't have, I said, well, damn, I wrote this long paper. What the hell am I going to do with it? And I just bought, that was about 98, 97. And I just bought georgehoward.net, as embarrassing as that is. And I put it up there just to have some content on it. And I kind of, that website became kind of a home place for the term Carolina Bay. And then I was contacted. You want me to continue here? Because it kind of leads in the Younger Dryas of that and
Yeah,
how,
yeah, absolutely. I'd like to get into that next.
yeah. And if people aren't familiar with that, that's a proposition of a number of scientists and myself who've been publishing papers for 15 years saying that there was a tremendous climate crash 13,000 years ago, known as the Younger Dryas. We believe was actually caused from above, that it was caused by a swarm of comet fragments from space. So I had that paper up there, and I got some kooky emails from a guy that claimed to be an archaeologist. It's very wild, that kind of stuff, a lot of underlining and bolding and all of that kind of stuff. And he was a little bit touched, but I think also intuitive. And he said, I've discovered evidence that there was a tremendous explosion, and I want to know more about Carolina Bays. I didn't pay much attention to it at first. And then I got another email that said, I'm in touch with the fellow who's been emailing you, and he may seem a little strange. His name was William Topping, but I'm working with Topping. I think he's on to something, and we'd like to collaborate on Carolina Bays because we believe there was a tremendous explosion of some type over the Midwest and Canada 13,000 years ago, and we believe that independently from the evidence that he had gained at an archaeological site called Gainey in Michigan. And then we were Googling or AltaVisting, whatever you do, such things back then, and explosions over the Midwest and ancient cataclysm, blah, blah, blah. And they came across my Carolina Bay paper, which is always interesting in science, where people from two different sources of information, two different paths to coming to a conclusion, discover each other, and they've been independent. And they were
Yeah.
coming from different directions the whole time. And then I saw his email address, and his address was 1 Cyclotron Drive, Berkeley, California. I was like, well, this guy's for real. And that was Dr. Richard Firestone, and he was the lead of the very first paper on the Younger Dryas event. And they were very gracious to let me join that paper as a co-author. And I did some field work here in North Carolina and helped out as I can. I think I earned my place. And then I've been publishing on and off with them and a member of what we now call the Comet Research Group since that time, since 2007. So what, 4, 5, 6, 7, damn, 17 years now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you have written a lot of papers. I mean, I printed out just a small
Oh,
portion
you're
of what
kidding.
what I could find out there, and the rest are just saved in my computer because I ran out of paper doing it. But yeah,
Ah,
you've been you've been involved in a ton of papers about this subject. It's pretty incredible.
yeah. Well, they have a big co-author list, and it's serious. You got to contribute. But there's a core team of very good scientists and technical writers that do most of the writing. Those are beautifully written papers. So I wouldn't dare take credit for the actual crafting of the
Oh yeah,
language. You know,
yeah.
we go in and you proof them and you agree that, yes, I like this. And you always make a few changes, to the actual writing. And then you're, granted a co-author status, which is really cool because, I'm totally uncredentialed, just like you are, just like the vast majority of people who would listen to this. I'm a pajama scientist. I like to sit up late and read interesting things on the internet that are
Yep.
on the
Same
cutting edge
here.
of human understanding, right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, there are millions of us. And I'm a very lucky one because I got to kind of ride with the big guys, right? And actually
Absolutely.
join scientific papers. And there during that early time in the first, I don't know, roughly 10 years, um, I was very much on the science side of it, but I've always had a very intense interest in mysteries, unknown, unexplained aspects of science and whatnot. But kind of stayed away from the woo. I was kind of more on the science side. But I had a foot in both camps, and I came to know Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock And then a number of other people went and spoke at some conferences and whatnot on the Younger Dryas event, and just really loved their vibe too. It was great to know the scientists and great to know what I call the speculators and the self-educated and the authors. And then I kind of had a foot in both camps, and that lent itself very well to starting the Cosmic Summit, which is the yearly speaker program that we just wrapped up in June in Greensboro, North Carolina, and we'll have another one. And what that does is feature speculators and also published scientists, which I've got a good Rolodex for that. So I had a really good Rolodex to be able to put together that kind of speaker event, and I had the time and the means, and did so. So that was the origin of the Cosmic Summit, all the way back to 2000. Ooh, shoot, go back to 90 and 98. Kind of been doing this stuff. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very impressive. Hopefully,
Yeah.
I'm planning I can attend next year.
Yeah, man. I hope you can come too, Jim. Absolutely.
It would be great. I love
Yeah.
all those guys you just mentioned.
We'll give you a podcaster discount.
No, perfect. Thank you so
Hold me to
much.
it. Okay.
Okay, so the Younger Dryas. You want to get into that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. What you want to?
Actually, I've got a map here. Uh, speaking of the Carolina Bays, that the you refer to it as the blood splatter.
Blood spatter pattern.
Yeah, I thought
Mm-hmm.
that was really interesting.
Yeah, there you go. You got that one you've got highlighted right now probably shows the blood spatter aspect to it pretty
Yep.
good.
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah. Yeah. So, as people can see, the Carolina Bays are concentrated and most well known for their distribution along the Atlantic seaboard, right? The flat coastal plain of the east coast of North America. I kind of call it the front yard of America. And there was some understanding that there were similar features in Nebraska, and been very, very thin discussion of it, but it was out there. A guy named Zanner, who I believe was a soil scientist or geologist, had noted they called him not the Nebraska Bays, but whatever. He noted that they had a similarity to the Carolina Bays. And then you had just showed in that previous image LIDAR, right?
Yeah,
And LIDAR is the amazing technology that allows you to image very fine differences in elevation from space and from planes. And that has only become available for most locations in the last 15 years or so. And very proud to say that me and Alan West, who is one of the leading lights of the Comet Research Group, were the first people to review Nebraska's LIDAR and look at and publicize the fact that not only were they similar to Carolina Bays, anybody that sees those features out in Nebraska would say those are Carolina Bays.
yeah,
Right? It's the exact same damn thing. And unbelievably, they point to the same location. So Carolina Bays are all oriented aligned, and as you can see, they point more westerly to the north and more northerly and easterly further south. So they range in their direction, which is very unusual unless they somehow coordinated themselves. And then the same alignment and orientation exhibits itself at Nebraska. So, in both of those areas have similar shallow geology, surface geology. So, they're sandy landscapes that have a shallow water table. And that means that whatever force was underway to create them would seems to show itself in only that kind of landscape. So that's why you don't see it elsewhere, right? And it also, there's some understanding that those kinds of impacts worded to ice may concentrate themselves in kind of a butterfly pattern, right? So that it may also be more concentrated in those areas and also only exhibit itself where you have that kind of sandy soils with shallow water table. So you've got the Carolina Bays out in Nebraska, and Alan and I pointed that out. They've become a big part of the story and made it even more compelling.
Yeah, absolutely. How they all point towards Saginaw Bay.
More or less. Yep. And
I
that
think
was
that's where the majority of the comet landed.
well, I'll tell you what, Jim, I won't say agnostic because that sounds like such a punt, but I'm not even convinced that they're Younger Dryas, right? I think there's a strong possibility there is. There's also some reason to believe that because of the way coastal terraces arrange themselves and bays arrange themselves on it, that they may be much older than that. There's some evidence that they're older,
Okay.
but and those are good friends who are very interested and open-minded about the origin of the Carolina Bays. And that's Chris Cottrell and Michael Davies are thinking they must be much older. And also friend Antonio Zamora sticks to the belief that they were 12,000 years ago. So I'm not, unless I was absolutely pinned down, I don't know, even if I was pinned down, I, I don't claim that they are one that I am certain that they are connected to it and never have. And that's kind of funny because you get tied to something like this, these two subjects, and people assume just because you publicize the possibility and the interest that it may be related, you must certainly believe 100% that it is. And in my case, that's it's not quite, but I do believe that they were created all at once, right? And that is completely contrary to what the mainstream believes. That they believe they were created over thousands of years, and I believe 4 different epochs they have. Some of them separated by 10,000 or more years, where the winds from the ice sheet, they call them katabatic winds that blow off the ice sheet, 2 mile high ice sheet that used to sit above northern North America. They blow down into the south and blow across the shallow water table landscape, and depressions that have water in them somehow blow themselves out into this elliptical shape. That would be the mainstream's contention. And they say that happened 3 or 4 times. And I absolutely disagree with that. I think they were all created at once. I think if they were created at 3 or 4 different eras, you would have some indication that, hey, these look like class A, the first ones. These look like class B when it came back and did it again. These look like class D. Maybe they would be oriented a little bit differently,
Yeah,
right?
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that there be some genetic difference between those classes. Unless, of course, I guess Class A, when Class B was forming, went and reoriented themselves because the winds were in it. It gets really complicated. It turns into a Rube Goldberg machine, and I think it's special pleading to believe so. Right?
Yeah.
I think they all happened at once. The time and the mechanism by which they were created, I think, is still a very open and fun question. I love Zamora's hypothesis that he does believe they came from Saginaw, so he ties it to 12,000 years ago. I think the Saginaw thing is fascinating, and that was originally, I think, Michael Davies's contribution. He's at centos.org and the Carolina Bay Survey, if people want to go look at Michael's stuff. CINTOS.org, and Carolina Bay Survey will get you there. And they have done an incredible amount of work as citizen scientists to define the characteristics of the bays and to make responsible hypothesizing about what caused them. But Zamora says that what happened was when you had the impact into the ice sheet that may have resulted in Saginaw Bay, that, and seems that physics back him up and whatnot, that there would have been an earthquake would have reached North Carolina, for instance, a terrible, terrible earthquake would have reached North Carolina well before the ejected ice from the ice cap that was excavated by the impact. So you can actually, the NASA Big Gun out at Ames Laboratory has simulated this deliberately with Carolina Bays in mind. And they'll shoot a high speed pellet at ice, and as you might think, it shatters and throws it out like that, back to that blood spatter pattern,
Yeah.
right? So those chunks of ice would have spent some time in the air, and that earthquake would have beat them to our landscape. And if you shake a shallow water table, sandy landscape in an earthquake, you have a phenomenon known as earthquake liquefaction,
Yeah, like
which is
almost like quicksand.
that's exactly right, Jim. It turns into quicksand. And what Antonio says is you had it in that kind of quicksand state, and then the hypersonic boulders of ice from Michigan would have landed on the coastal plain and floop, bloop, and Antonio Zamora at his YouTube site has dozens and dozens of videos where he simulates that on a smaller scale, and they bear a very strong resemblance to Carolina Bays. So I think the heretical, non-mainstream people were doing more work and better work on the bays than the mainstream is doing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'd agree.
yeah.
What about the black mat layer that's been
Well,
found all over the planet?
yeah,
That dates back to the Younger Dryas.
it definitely dates back to Younger Dryas. Yeah, that's easy to date, and it allows us to date what we believe was the cataclysm. Okay, and the original approach to this, when I said that Dr. Firestone was interested in this with Dr. Topping back in the 90s, well, they published a paper in 2001 in kind of an obscure journal, and they made some speculative claims, a couple of mistakes and whatnot. Fine paper, good starting point, but it had its flaws. Uh, Another team or other scientists got in touch with them, particularly Alan West and Dr. Jim Kennett, a member of the National Academy of Sciences, in 2005, got in touch with Dr. Firestone and said, "Hey, let's go do another paper. We've got an idea for how to approach this with materials testing instead of just speculation. And would you join us on the paper?" And I got involved around that time, got pulled back in. And what's my point there? The black mat. And what Alan West and what Dr. Kennett were proposing to approach it and to create publishing worthy evidence was to go to where you find at well-studied archaeological sites, ones that have been published on for years and years, like Blackwater Draw in New Mexico or Murray Springs in Arizona, which are well-known paleoarchaeological sites that have both the Ice Age mammals that we can talk about, like your mammoth and your, I don't know if they got the saber-toothed cats, but your mammoth and your giant ground sloth and all the wild creatures that lived right up until 13,000 years ago, where those are found and where the spear points from the first acknowledged Indian presence in North America, the Clovis people, had a very distinctive spear point. Usually I show them on podcasts, but I don't have it with me right now. And where you find those materials at more than 80% of sites where they have been found and excavated, you also find a dark layer of soil that we
Above them?
refer to exactly above them. And they do not occur above it, they occur only below it. And the idea was that, in fact, that had been a rule of thumb for paleontologists and archaeologists that were digging in that period. They knew they'd start getting to the good stuff when they passed into the black dirt, right? But then no one had ever gone and taken a damn good look at that dirt to see, is there anything special about this? Despite the fact that the comet-induced dinosaur extinction, right, also had a band of unique material, right? And that's called the KT boundary or the KPG boundary. And that's very, very famous in science. And the Alvarez team, father and son, kind of took the same approach, said that there's an anomalous layer of material in rock. Ours is only 13,000 years old, so it hadn't turned into rock, right? And kind of hard to say if it would still exhibit itself if it were rock, but that won't happen for many millions of years. But theirs was in rock. And when they tested that 65 million year ago boundary, they found it was elevated in iridium and that it contained microspherules. Well, iridium has a certain crustal abundance, and you're not expected to find it in any quantity, except very, very, very low parts per million of kind of an average rate around the world. But it's very much more abundant in cosmic materials, in meteorites and carbonaceous chondrites and whatnot. Will be very, very elevated in iridium. So it stood to reason that that boundary was, if it were very, very elevated in iridium, one of the only explanations for that could be that it was being enriched from above. And that was geochemical evidence of something that had come from space. So that worked for the comet dinosaurs. And West and Kennett and others, I guess myself, took the same approach and said, well, let's go look at the look at the geochemistry of the black mat that's found at the vast majority of paleosites in North America and see if there's anything special. And bada bing, bada boom, there sure was. It was very highly edited. It turned out to be that kind of our signature element was not iridium, but platinum. Even though there were certainly signs, very, very expensive to test for iridium, first of all. So it kind of made it nice that it was platinum. And iridium is in such low concentrations that it can also be kind of squirrely, right? There's a thing called the nugget effect. You might miss it and find it sometimes and whatnot. But the platinum's inexpensive to test for and very, very elevated at that location. So you had a geochemical signal, and then you also had a suite of what we call other proxies. In other words, you're never going to find a video of the comet hitting, but you can find evidence that is a proxy for it having occurred. And that is principally microspherules. And microspherules are what they sound like. Little tiny droplets, balls, right? Much smaller than that, in fact. And you can get a little bit bigger, like the ones at the YD, they actually, the ones at the dinosaur boundary, I think actually get fairly large, but ours are mostly microscopic. And if you go take a powerful magnet and pass it over the soil from just below the black mat, the black mat itself is not necessarily debris or a burn from the comet. Seems like it would be, but actually what it is it's the signature of the algal, cold, wet algal wasteland that emerged after the cataclysm. So you had a terrible 1,200 years after that. And that had a completely different ecological face to it. And a lot of that was algal and gross and cold and dreary. And that's what the black mat is. Below that, we find the spherules and the platinum. And the spherules are the melted raindrops of the soil and the comet material being kicked up into plumes of plasma. So when you have air bursts, a certain class, and we believe the vast majority of what hit Earth that day were of a class that doesn't necessarily make it all the way to the ground and create a crater. So everything
like
from
Tunguska.
Exactly, Jim, just like Tunguska, where it burns the absolute fuck out of everything and leaves things, and they had them there too, like microspherules and also nanodiamonds, which were discovered at Tunguska too. So when that plasma plume hits the ground, and there's some great simulations of it out there, it kicks the surface soil and parts of the impactor up into the air and melts it all, right? It's all molten and a vapor in the air. And then that vapor freezes, essentially, gets back down to regular temperature, which is freezing, versus 2,500 degrees C, which can be as hot as this does, just hellaciously hot. So when that stuff cools off, that melted material turns back into little tiny droplet spherules. And those have unique textures, unique composition, etc., that define them as having been cosmically induced. And all of that science was derived from the comet dinosaur thing. So there was already a template Did people respect our adherence to that template and then accept the radical hypothesis that you could have had something like this happen only 13,000 years ago? Hell no, they didn't. So most of the mainstream, at least publicly, has not accepted our suite of evidence, which matches the suite of evidence for the KT boundary. Right. So the one great realization, we kind of got halfway there in the 80s by realizing, or I guess it took till 1994. It's very controversial. It took 14 years of arguing about the comet dinosaur thing before they finally gave in and it hit the textbooks. Right. So we're at year 17 and going through another fight, but it's much more. But that was very valuable. It proved before then there were no acknowledged worldwide extinction catastrophes caused by things from space. That was outrageous in the 20th century, early 20th century. And by the close of the 20th century, it was accepted in the textbook. So you got something out there, and it's 65 million years ago, catastrophe. The thing with the Younger Dryas that makes it very hard for the mainstream to accept is that it is, excuse me, it's vastly more recent, 13,000 years ago. Think about it. If you have a timeline, say, of 5,000 units, so you took 5,000, it's actually, 3,200 miles out to California from where I am now, but let's just say it's 5,000, okay? And you drew that timeline from here to Barstow, California, where I-40 hits the ocean in California. Drive all the way from Raleigh to California, and you split that up into a timeline of 5,000 pieces. The Younger Dryas event would be, 3/4 of a mile away from us, as opposed to the dinosaur event, which is all the way in California. So it's so much closer temporally that it caused them concerns. And one of our chief critics says that it would be outrageously improbable for something so dramatic to have happened so recently to us, something that is so rare that happens on the order of many millions of years, at least in his view, to have happened so recently. But I look at it differently. I believe that we are here able to recognize it because it led to us, that we're a result of it. So it took us 13,000 years of cultural change induced by the impact to reach a technological state where we could recognize what turned the corner for us, from hunter-gatherers to agriculturalists, civilized city-living people that eventually grew to understand why they became that way, right?
Yeah.
Why we're the naked ape with the black mirror,
Yep. Yep.
And so it's a little recursive. He says, well, it's just impossible for that to have happened. But he said, it's if you're at a casino and something highly unusual happens, well, no, the dice are rigged here. We're actually related to that event. They're not two independent events, so it's unfair to look at them that way. So that's the Younger Dryas event, and thank you for printing all that stuff out and taking an interest in it, man.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, when we first got into this, Jim, you could fit everybody that knew of the Ice Age comet or suspected it and had any evidence for it, because people have suspected it since Plato. Plato said 9,000 years before my own time, everything went to shit, right?
Yeah.
AKA Atlantis.
Yep.
And people, everybody from Newton to Whiston to, Ignatius Donnelly and then Manuel Velikovsky. There's always been an element. In fact, up until 300 years ago, it was the prevailing view that there's a grand catastrophe in the deep past. And then that became totally pushed out of science. All right. And what's my point here? The Younger Dryas event. Oh, yeah. When we first had evidence for it, back before we published that paper, you could fit us all in a minibus, right? And it's been a really interesting kind of life lesson and adventure to be a part of something where you had everybody in a minibus, and now it's millions of people.
Yeah.
Like yourself, Rogan fans that hear about it, Randall Carlson fans. It's now finally, and I've watched every little bit of that.
Yeah.
Egging it on best I can.
Yeah, Graham Norton.
Yep,
all the stuff with Egypt and the pyramids and everything.
that's right.
I
That's
mean,
right. It tied into a lot of existing speculation, but now there are people. I mean, believe me, 15 years ago, nobody knew what the hell I was talking about.
yeah,
And I was at a pizza place out in Sedona, and a guy asked me, "Why are you in town?" Started explaining. He goes, "Oh yeah, you mean the black mat?" I was like, "Yeah, man." People kind of know
crazy.
about it now, so it's cool to see it become a little bit part of culture. But it's got a long, long way to go.
Yeah,
So that's why I'm
no,
always willing to do podcasts and stuff.
appreciate it.
Hmm.
Uh, so between the black mat layer from the Younger Dryas and the one from the dinosaurs,
Yeah.
because there's been speculation this is the fourth or fifth time there's been a civilized society on the planet.
Okay.
Have there been any other black mat layers found in between the two ever? Anywhere?
It's a good question, Jim. Um, no, there's suspicion of other impacts before and after. We think there was a grand catastrophe that shook up Alaska terribly, right? 35 to 40,000 years ago, and people might have caught wind of that on Joe Rogan with John Reeves, the Boneyard, Alaska fella, right? You ever seen
I haven't.
Boneyard, Alaska?
No, I
Oh,
haven't
yeah.
seen that one yet.
Oh, gosh. Go see John Reeves on Rogan. And he's talking about his gold mine up in Alaska where it is absolutely littered in giant heaps of broken bones. And my mammoth tusk, we suspect, actually came from there. You can't see it
Oh,
now. As you know, I broke my ankle a couple of weeks ago, so I'm kind of stuck in one spot.
yeah, no
And
worries.
yeah, and yeah, so
If you
they're
wanna,
just,
if you wanna send me a picture of it, I can throw it up in the video when I
oh, okay,
splice
I sure
put it
will.
together.
Yeah, that'd
Cool.
be cool. So I've got a 11-foot mammoth tusk in there that came from there. Actually, I can see it.
11 feet?
Yeah,
Oh my God.
240 pounds, 22 inches around at the bottom of it. And
Wow.
yeah, the Cosmic Tusk. And it's been on National Geographic and whatnot because these pieces and parts we suspected at first were related to the Younger Dryas catastrophe. And they had, half dozen, maybe a few more of these bones that had magnetic nickel rich iron blotches and also penetrations into the bone of stuff that was nickel rich iron. Well, nickel rich iron only comes from space, right? So all those pieces had seen something dramatic happen from above. But then when we got them all C14 tested, they all came back as 35 to 40,000 years ago. So it wasn't related to the Younger Dryas. But then you're like, hey, something else happened.
Yeah, and they got hit by
So
it.
that's right. So there's certainly similar earth traumas as this. As far as there being black mats, you kind of got to think, even on that one, if you had to go back another 20,000 years before the Younger Dryas, you'd be very deep, right? So let's say, and hard to tell whether it would create such a thing. Who knows whether it changed the climate in a similar manner, et cetera. But there's certainly the geochemical evidence can be found at those layers, and there's nobody looking, Jim. It could be out there, but it's
I
just
know.
not looked for. Yeah, yeah,
It's crazy.
yeah. And black mats can be caused by a lot of things. And there was a paper that came out critical of us that pointed that out, like we didn't know that. But this black mat, you can look in Lommel, Belgium. If you go look at the called the Usselo layer, Ussello. It's all over, Northern Europe. The cover sands up there, you go down a few meters and there's a black band, right? So it shows
Hmm.
itself even over in Europe, but there's no black bands above it, no black bands below it. You can find places that have a whole bunch of black bands because an algal mat formed, went away, reformed, went away. But those are places that are attractive to reforming algal black mats. So yeah, the Younger Dryas event would get lost among those, I would think, if you got back that far. Um, but there are plenty of places, and you can see it all over North America, and like I say, also in Europe, where it's alone, where it's clearly distinctive, that it's not just another algal map. It's its own thing. There you go. There's Murray Springs up in the top middle there. Yeah. There you go. See, they're not
Yeah.
black mats above or below it. Something happened right there that was unique. And one thing that tells you that, see how it's the similar soil color for several feet below the black mat?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that had a for thousands, and that's 13,000 years from the top to the black mat. So let's say below the black mat, let's call that another 20,000 years. Well, there was a uniform enough climate at that time to all produce the same color soil, the same shade. Then you have the black mat, but look, it changed things enough so the soil that formed for thousands of years afterwards has a slightly different shade. So it changed the world.
Gotcha.
Yeah, dramatically. Good one. That's one of the few East Coast black mats.
This was in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's the good work of Mr. Malcolm LeCompte.
It's amazing they find this all over the world, yet the mainstream's not willing to accept it as
Ah, it's terrible.
reality.
It's a dark, dark truth about human nature and modern science. Is I would you would think this would make things so interesting, and oftentimes our critics will even have the gall to say, "Oh, I wish it were true. It's so interesting. It would be so interesting, and be fun to teach and whatnot." Well, it can actually be both. It
Yeah.
happens to be true, and that's what's so damn interesting about it.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
almost like they reject things that
Yeah, that
are
didn't fit
interesting
the
and sexy just because they're interesting and sexy.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, nothing more interesting and sexy than mammoths and diamonds and plasma hell coming from space and changes in cultures. We should point out, it also caused the extinction, the Younger Dryas event led to the extinction of hundreds of species of mammals, right, in North America. And that includes the American camel and the saber-toothed tiger and the giant ground sloth and the American lion and the mammoth and the mastodon. All of them blink out around 13,000 years ago or within a couple of hundred years afterwards, right? We do not contend that they all were evaporated on that day, right? It would have changed the world dramatically, changed their habitats dramatically. Some of them certainly could have migrated, etc. Gotten the hell out of Dodge. But that is the turning point for the megafauna of North America. That's where they go away, and that's always been a great mystery. In the late 1960s, when environmentalism was coming along, the disappearance of all those animals became a tenet of a somewhat worthy cause, one that I was kind of involved with earlier today, talking endangered species because it used to be part of my business and regular business. And when they were trying to pass the Endangered Species Act and bring attention to man's terrible effect on some species, Paul Martin wrote a book. A scientist named Paul Martin wrote what I believe to be a very politicized book that said that humans wiped all those creatures out. They hunted every single short-faced bear down to the last one, down to the very last mammoth.
I've heard
You
that
know,
before.
yeah, they chased them all down with their, with their spears and hunted them to death. And the glyptodon, which is a armadillo the size of a golf cart, right? It was walking around just 13,000 years ago. And remember, all this stuff is just 4 times the um, time ago as the pyramids, right? This is very, very recent. These were modern humans, not culturally, but certainly anatomically and whatnot, saw this happen. This is yesterday, essentially. But said that we killed them all off with their spheres. The Clovis people did, as you call those people, the Clovis people. But who the hell goes into the cave to kill the last short-faced bear while there's still a squirrel to be had, Jim? Right? Or an oyster or a fish or anything that you can eat that ain't going to eat you,
Yeah.
right? Why would you go to so much trouble? Yeah.
So-
And it's literally, I think it's taken in kind of subspecies, but something like more than 200 species of animals. I mean, that's ridiculous. There is no way. I mean, just stop right there. I do not claim myself to be certain of too many things because I think that makes you a better scientist, if you will, avocational scientist as I am. I think it's better not to be a firm believer that everything's kind of, in a tentative state for the time being. But I will say there is no fucking way we hunted all those animals down to extinction. That they were using that as a political cudgel to help pass a very worthy law, the Endangered Species Act. And we're bad, bad people, and we do drive things to extinction, but don't pin that one on us.
Yeah.
No, no, no. We're kind of lucky we made it out the other side of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, and there's signs that there were dramatic drops in human populations at that time. So it could have blinked us out, but we're tough. We're tough birds, so we're still around.
That's right. Uh, I'd like to talk to you about the pyramids a little bit.
Oh my gosh.
That's a new
Okay.
one for you. I haven't heard you talk about it on any other shows, so I was just curious to get your take on it.
Hmm.
When do you think they were built?
I'm kind of in the mainstream of the non-mainstream. In that, I believe the pyramids themselves are. I don't think you could. I think the evidence is thin to relate it to the Great Pyramid to Khafre. All you got's one carving or
Yeah.
one inscription, and that just did enough for me. But okay, let's say it's Khafre. I do believe it was in that time period, but I also believe, as Robert Schoch revealed to us 30 years ago, I think he's exactly right that the Sphinx far predates it and is
Mm,
much older and was
yeah.
probably recarved. So I'm down with all that. The thing that fascinates me is the older constructions. And I've been to Egypt 3 times, and I went in 2020 on a fantastic tour where we went with Johanna James and Ben, Uncharted X, and Jimmy Corsetti, and a whole bunch of other fun people. When we went over there in 2020 in the depth of COVID, and it was a fantastic, never to happen again Egypt tour because nobody was there, man.
That's
No one,
great. That would have
no
been great.
one. There were parking lots with hundreds of buses that would normally be filled with tourists from around the world. And we were just pulling right up to Karnak at noon and just walking through the turnstiles, and
Wow.
literally not another tourist there. So
Wow.
we were able to take pictures that you just couldn't get. National Geographic couldn't get because you couldn't clear all the tourists out.
Yeah.
Now the other side of that was, God bless them, the aggressive vendors were still there,
Of
and they
course.
were hungry, man. No one has ever been pestered more by aggressive vendors than we were on that trip because they hadn't seen anybody in 6 months.
Yeah.
We were over there in November, December, and they were desperate for some business. Again, God bless them, can't blame them. But they would chase you all the way until you slam the door bus shut. And but I'm fascinated by some of the lesser known, but people who are interested in this stuff like us are familiar with them. Things like the Serapeum.
The the
With,
Serapeum, yeah. The
yeah,
boxes that are in there.
that's right.
That
Those
that
boxes.
is mind-boggling construction of those boxes.
And it's
I
as
mean,
every bit as interesting as the pyramids. You
the
know?
the yeah, the pyramids too, like the
Yeah.
70,000 ton stones that are lifted 350 feet in the air for the king's chamber.
Yeah.
I mean, mind blowing. We couldn't do that today if we wanted to, but there it is.
Yeah, there it is.
And the
You
boxes in the
know,
Serapeum, I think Rant or Christopher Dunn,
yeah.
he's contacted multiple granite companies all over the world
Yep.
and just described the box to them and how he wanted it made. They couldn't do it if they wanted to. They
Oh, the
said,
makers
yeah,
are the most interesting people to go ask about this stuff. You ask an actual maker, a
yeah,
man who makes things for a living of a similar nature,
yep,
and they don't have to be experts on this stuff. They go, well, they are experts on this stuff. They aren't
yeah,
experts on what people think of this or that time period and what people were capable of. They'll go, no, I can't do that.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
no way.
You want a box like that? We'll make 5 slabs, bring them out to you, bolt them together, and that's the best we
Yeah,
can do.
that's right. Yeah, we ain't going to cut that and cut
Yeah,
those corners, which are, damn near head high
yeah,
down in there, 6 feet down in a box with a perfect right angle corner. How the hell do you do that with a copper chisel, Jim?
exactly. Copper
There's just
chisels
no
and
way.
rocks. And not to mention the interiors are polished like mirror finish in most of
Yeah.
them.
And then
And
kind of
then,
back to what we were saying about Khafre and the Great Pyramid, then they attribute their age because on some of them, they're these crude hieroglyphics
oh,
that
yeah, I
looks like
saw
a
that.
kid tapped them in there.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, and it's clearly
If
graffiti.
if you could make that box, you would do a
Yeah,
lot better job in describing something in the box.
that's exactly right, buddy. That's exactly right. And the problem is when you try to come up with your answers, then they shoot them down. They say, okay, it was Malcolm Bendall's amazing plasma machine or something, blah, blah, blah. But I like to kind of leave it in a mystery. I don't know what the hell cut that, but I just know what didn't do it. And that's a copper chisel.
Yeah.
And I
Or
know that given all our tools today, it would be extraordinarily difficult, unique exercise to make them.
I think we'd
Um,
have to create the machinery to be able to do that. I don't think something like that exists right now.
yeah. And as far as things being older than believed, um, you go over to the Assyrian at the Temple of Abydos, which is behind it and below it. And I went there, and of course, went to the Valley Temple, which is beside the Sphinx. And both of them, they were made by the same people, man.
Yeah.
I mean, they have the exact same architectural vibe. They have the exact same gigantic, perfectly fit stones. And they just got the same feel. It's like, you're in the same home builder's home. You can kind of feel it, right?
Yeah.
What that guy makes. And at Abydos, the Assyrian, they say it was built with the temple. No, it just no, 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 no. Can't prove it, but it ain't. It doesn't look the same. It's behind it. It's buried. They put that temple there because there was an older construction, which was
Yeah.
the Assyrian. And whoever built the Assyrian is the same people who built the Valley Temple. And my gut says that that was long, long, long before the pyramid builders. That was somebody else doing something else, and then later constructions were associated with them, like the pyramids and the Temple of Seti the One at Abydos.
Yeah.
All right, so yeah, I find the pyramids absolutely fascinating. I'm starting to really think. I was kind of agnostic about it. There's so many different theories, but I do believe that they're utilitarian. That they were doing something with them. I do not believe that that was a simple. Well, it certainly wouldn't be simple in anybody's understanding, but that they're simply mortuaries. That they're
Yeah.
um,
Or a tribute to their king or ruler or
that's right.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah,
They're definitely built with a purpose.
that's right. That they're not tombs
Yeah.
because we know what tombs look like in Egypt. And you
Yeah.
go to the Valley, I'm trying to say Valley of the Kings, and the tombs for thousands of years are absolutely littered with the most beautiful art on every single square inch. They were showing off their story and praising the king and the pharaoh or whatnot, and it's just littered with art and hieroglyphics. And it's funny, a lot of people don't pick this up, but then they think about it. Everybody knows it. They ain't no hieroglyphics in the pyramids.
Yeah. None.
Uh-uh. And then even stranger, there ain't no pyramids in the hieroglyphics. There are no depictions of the pyramids
That's another crazy thing to
anywhere
think
in
about.
Egyptian art.
You think if
And
they
that's
had
just a,
taken the time and the manpower to build something that amazing, they would have
yeah,
carved it in along with the little animals they're hunting and
yeah,
whatever
yeah,
else
yeah,
that,
yeah.
yeah.
And I'm not saying that they weren't there when the people who did that art, it's not like they weren't aware of them, but they must have revered them in some fashion that they didn't care to depict them. right? Almost like Muhammad would be the Muslims. I don't know. That they just didn't want to show them. But there's no art in the pyramids and no pyramids in the art is the way to
It's a good,
simplify that contention.
yeah,
And
good way to put it.
yeah, and that's just mysterious. Who the hell knows why? But it just says that something's going on, man.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Like I'm sure you saw them while you were out there in Egypt, the machining marks left in some of those stones that looks like a 32-inch wide circular saw blade. And I'm a carpenter, so I know all
yeah,
about circular saw blade cuts.
yeah.
That is exactly what those are.
There's no question about it, man. There's that
Eh,
piece I forget the name of Abu Rawash.
Yeah.
These people, yeah, probably seen on Ben's videos, and I've been to that
Yep.
same thing. I've got some great pictures of it. I'll send them to you. And because all everybody's seeing these days are Johanna and Ben's pictures, and the snakes. I got some pictures too,
Okay,
right?
cool.
Yeah,
Good.
and
We could use those.
yeah, but you see that smooth cut, saw cut, and then it goes rough just beyond it.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's a damn saw. Something was buzzing into that. No one chipped that out. It's
Yeah,
just
exactly.
so plainly obvious.
And
But I think our better times are ahead of us. Yeah.
the scoop marks.
Mm-hmm. And the scoop marks.
I mean,
Yeah.
that is like they had
In the
some way to
middle.
soften the granite and scoop it out with like a shovel. I mean,
Yeah.
the way
As
those
smooth
look.
as they could be.
Yeah, all the videos from the Brothers of the Serpent, exploring all over the monolithic sites, the scoop marks, and how those rooms are built out of the gigantic stones, and they're
Mhm.
literally cut into the corners.
Hell
So
yeah,
you've got
man.
you've got one stone that makes up two corners. If you
Yeah.
were building a stone building, you'd stack the bricks to make your corner.
Yeah.
You wouldn't stack a bunch of bricks and then cut the corner out of granite that's what, 8 on the ohms hardness scale.
It's like they're showing off.
Exactly, but it must have
It's
been
like they're
so
going, look
easy.
at what the hell we could do. We're going to do it in the most absolute difficult possible manner.
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
the construction is just mind-boggling.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Just God, I just if I had a time machine, I wouldn't know what time to go to, but I would want to go see how those things were actually made.
Damn, I hope we live long enough, man. I think
Yeah,
we're going
wouldn't
to
that
have
be
those kind of
amazing?
things one day. God, I'd love to see. And our crowd will be at the front of the line to go see what the hell happened back then. But I'm pretty hopeful in the big picture, that we'll get to the bottom of some of this because I think because of the internet and communications, it's taken, 30 years to really start kicking in. But, in the 20th century, we relied on experts, right?
Yeah,
And there'd be some number of people who would become interested in Egypt and they would have a certain set, certain individual intellect and skill set, and they become an Egyptologist. And they institution pays for their education. They get their education at the institutions, and they become the expert. And that's the best we could do. Made sense. But I think what's happening now is the information is so readily available to the billions worldwide that you've got another contender for the knowledge. And that's the crowdsourced wisdom of the self taught,
yeah. I
right?
think YouTube's going to be the new media source in the future if you
That's
want
right.
truth.
And it floats to the top.
Yeah.
That's
I
right.
mean, 20 years ago, if you thought of something and you wanted an answer, you'd have to go to the library and look it up in a book or an
Yeah.
encyclopedia.
Yeah.
Now you literally Google it and it's at your fingertips in 2 seconds.
And there are people out there that become interested in these subjects that wouldn't have had the ability to go to those institutions, but there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of them out of the billions worldwide. And then the Snake Brothers are a good example, right?
Oh, yep.
And Randall Carlson and on, but people who are self-taught and are intelligent and open-minded are, I think, getting us further down the road than the old institutional experts are, and
Yeah,
that we're going to
absolutely.
have, that we're going to have a new world of experts, of responsible people. Back in 30 years ago and whatnot, it was generally people that were completely on the woo side, right?
Yeah.
And who you see now in our community and the people that speak at the Cosmic Summit and whatnot, these people aren't woo. They're just asking tough damn questions and they're getting out and seeing it.
Yeah.
They're going to these places. They're going to Göbekli Tepe. They're going out to see the other tepes. They're going to Karhan Tepe. You know, um, And I think that's going to be a more valuable source of knowledge than institutional knowledge moving forward.
Yeah, some of the stuff at Göbekli Tepe is crazy. Like
Hmm.
the carving of the Ceres constellation.
Yep.
It was Series A, B, and C carved
Yep.
into that pillar.
Yeah.
And what we just discovered Series C in the past few decades.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there it is carved into a rock that's what, 30,000 years old, maybe?
Hmm.
I mean,
Hmm.
that is mind blowing.
It
Not to
is,
mention,
man.
I mean, we could talk for hours about this stuff, but the mathematics behind the construction of the pyramids and
Yeah.
the way they're oriented north and
Yeah.
south. They've
Yeah.
got the aquifer running under them. What do you think about Christopher Dunn's power plant idea for Giza?
Oh, well, that's what I was saying. I'm more and more certain that they're utilitarian, that they had some purpose.
Yeah, and another
And
guy I
I am a
found out.
believer in plasma technologies now,
Yeah,
or at least
yeah, me
extremely.
too. I think something just
Yeah.
like Tesla was working on,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah. I
with
think there's probably another
Wardenclyffe.
avenue. Yeah. Another avenue to, what would seem to be very advanced states of power production
Yeah,
and manipulation of physics. And I wouldn't
uh,
have believed that 10 years ago.
yeah, me either. I
But
would have
I've learned
just
so much about plasma and whatnot. Highly recommend a book called The New Science of Heaven by Robert Temple.
okay.
And I was in touch with Robert today, and he introduced Chandra Wickramasinghe at the Cosmic Summit. I might have just him next year come back and talk about plasma, because there's a lot more to it than I'd ever imagined. And that
Yeah,
is a fantastic book. And that stuff may be readily accessible and may have been accessible to the ancients. And that may help explain why they went to all this trouble. Maybe it wasn't that tough for them. Who knows?
yeah, exactly what I think.
Yeah.
However they were doing it, it wasn't difficult.
That's right. That's right. They were showing off, man. The vases are a good example. The pre-dynastic vases that
Yeah,
are
I was
being
just gonna.
scanned out there.
Yep, I was just gonna ask you about that. Matt Bell's got a bunch of them.
That's right, man. And I got
As
a
soon
bunch of them
as
too.
as soon as I
I
find
don't,
someone with a 3D printer, they release the plans for that one that they
yeah,
scanned. I
yeah.
can't wait to print out my own little copy of it.
Well, I got about 100 of them, maybe more, right? Because we gave them to the VIPs at the Cosmic Summit. So
Oh,
Matt
3D
Bell,
printed ones?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I got a big box of them.
Oh my God.
So actually, I got to offer them back to Matt because he gave them all to me, which is unbelievably nice gesture on behalf of the Cosmic Summit. And but we didn't use them all up, so I got a big box. So maybe I can send you one. You want one?
That would be amazing.
Okay, shoot me your address. I'll get you
Oh man, thank you
thing.
so
I
much.
need a fulfillment system. We got a bunch of extra T-shirts and stuff too. I got to figure out a way to unload that inventory.
You got
But
some
this has been a
a
lot of fun,
cosmic
Jim.
you got a
Yeah.
cosmic summit shirt. I'll wear it on the next episode.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. I'll send you a shirt, and I'll send you a 3D vase, man.
That'd be
And
great.
but I hope your viewers, anybody that sees this, will take an interest in the Cosmic Summit and consider coming next year. It's Cosmic Summit 2025. Actually, we just changed it. It's now on the main URL. So if you go to cosmicsummit.com, you can
Okay.
purchase tickets for 2025 at the lowest price they will ever be.
Awesome.
And that didn't happen last year. We had to adjust the price, which is not fair to the consumer, but we had to do what we had to do. We had to lower it. And people were really, really cool about it. Can't thank them enough. But we're learning as we go. And this price is only going to go up. And it's going to go up probably somewhat dramatically because we got all our costs figured out. So I recommend to people to go buy that pass now. There are just a limited number of these at this price, and we're going to have a date within the next week. We just talked to the
Oh,
hotel, and they're giving some pricing on 2 or 3 different date windows, but it'll be late August, early September, but not Memorial Day weekend.
awesome.
Or
Yeah, I'm
not
really
Labor
hoping
Day.
I can make it next year.
Yeah, I hope you can too, Jim. I've got to get on a call about the Cosmic Summit here in just a few minutes, man. But it was really nice joining you. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, thank you for making the time for me.
Okay. Well, if I can
Really
ever put you in
appreciate it,
touch with
George.
somebody or help you out, um, I'm happy to do so. And just appreciate your interest in our subjects, man. It's good to know you.
I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, man.
Okay,
Really an
Jim.
honor to
Thanks a
have
lot.
you.
Honored to
Thanks,
be on.
George.
Okay. See you.
Take care, man.